these victims and more than 1,000 like them. The DOJ is not doing its job. Will you create a task force with state and local law enforcement to make that happen?
Mr. Chairman.
Well, you know what? If he were part of the Epstein investigation, you wouldn't do anything about it.
Online chat room. Who he was?
Mr. Chairman, she's embarrassing you.
He's about to be
This is your committee, and she is embarrassing.
So we're back once again, and Jamie Raskin just slammed Pam Bondi over defending Trump. So basically, Trump could sue the federal government for $10 billion, and the very people inside the Justice Department connected to him would be the ones deciding whether the case should be settled. And when Jamie Raskin asked her about it, she couldn't give an answer. I'll share my thoughts at the end about this nonsense, but first let's watch what...
Article 2, Section 1, Clause 7 of the Constitution is the Domestic Emoluments Clause. And it says that the president is limited to his salary in office and cannot receive any other money from the federal government while he's in office. It cannot be increased by $1. This president is the first president in U.S. history who has repeatedly sued the federal government for $230 million for the judicial search warrant at Mar-a-Lago, which was perfectly lawful and was never struck down. But now he's suing the IRS for $10 billion. He's suing the IRS for $10 billion, which I think is around 80% of its annual budget, because his tax returns were leaked. And they were illegally leaked by a private contractor who actually is in prison now, Charles Littlejohn, but he wants $10 billion. Now, I want to ask you the question of whether you think it would violate the Domestic Emoluments Clause for you to settle that $10 billion case or any of the other claims that the president has made against the government. He himself has remarked, it's interesting because I'm the one that makes the deal, right? And he says, I kind of have to work it out with myself. Do you think it would violate the Domestic Emoluments Clause for the president to work out a deal from people who are his subordinates under his unitary executive theory to get money in one of these cases?
I'm not going to discuss pending litigation.
Okay, so theoretically you're saying because his privacy rights were violated in that tax case, and they were. I'm with the president on that. I mean, his Mar-a-Lago thing is ridiculous, but there's no doubt that his tax returns, despite the fact that he promised to release them, despite the fact that every other president released the tax returns, he suffered embarrassment when it showed that he hadn't paid taxes for several years, and he had a right for that not to happen. Now, I want to turn back to the Epstein survivors, because President Trump may have been a little bit embarrassed by the release of those tax returns. How much do you think the claims of these survivors are worth? As the good congressman from Kentucky just pointed out, there were lots of survivors who had decided, for reasons of their own, never to release their names. That determination was represented to people in Congress, and we built it into our federal law that their names could not be released, and yet you published their names, their phone numbers, their addresses, personally identifying information. If Donald Trump can get $10 billion theoretically from the Department of Justice, how much should these people get for a far worse violation of their privacy rights and a far greater danger established to them in their lives?
Do you even know who Chase Mulligan is? You're so obsessed with, you don't, do you?
I'm going to teach you the rules again. You're the Attorney General of the United States. We have rules here.
You're obsessed with him.
You're the Attorney General of the United States.
You're obsessed with Donald Trump. You have Trump derangement syndrome.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like my time
Mulligan will be
restored. I'd like my time restored.
In your district. In your district, and you don't even know about it, about keeping children safe from online predators.
Time belongs to the gentleman from Maryland. The gentleman can proceed.
Yeah, and I want the whole country to look at this, because this is the Attorney General of the United States whose job is law enforcement. We've never had a witness who has misunderstood our rules and been unable to conform his or her conduct to our rules before. We have only 5 minutes, and so we use our time to ask you specific questions.
How long are you giving me to answer?
Excuse me, I'm not yielding to you right now. I'd like that second restored too. So, Ms. Bondi, the way it works is we ask you a question and you answer it, and if you go off on a wild goose chase, another tangent, you start reading statistics, or you start talking about stuff going on in our district, and by the way, I invite you to my district. Come to my district, but that's not what we're here to do today, okay? So, and you do that, then we're allowed to say we reclaim our time. At that point, you have to be quiet. You have no choice. You have to be quiet. So I hope you understand the rule at this point. Now, here's what I want to ask you. You're in law enforcement. We've seen all kinds of evidence of crimes. And when we go over to the Department of Justice for the 4 computers for every member of Congress, we see more evidence of crimes. Will you create a joint task force of the Department of Justice and governors and state attorney generals and district attorneys across the country to investigate the crimes that have taken place against these victims and more than 1,000 like them? The DOJ is not doing its job. Will you create a task force with state and local law enforcement to make that happen?
He called Chase Mulligan a wild goose chase and didn't even know who he was. He is a defendant in your own district who preyed on girls.
Mr. Chairman.
Well, you know what? If he were part of the Epstein investigation, you wouldn't do anything about it.
Online chat rooms and committed sextortion. Yet he didn't even know in your tiny little district who he was.
Mr. Chairman, she's embarrassing you.
He's about to be
This is your committee, and she is embarrassing
Shame
you.
on you.
The time of the gentleman has expired. I would remind the committee that last Congress, Secretary Mayorkas was here numerous times, and he wouldn't answer our questions, even when we sent them to him ahead of time in writing. So that's what we've had to deal with. I think the Attorney General is doing just fine. We have votes shortly.
All right, so if you're sitting there thinking, what the hell did I just watch? You're not alone. Trump is suing the IRS for $10 billion. In January, President Donald Trump, along with his sons Donald Trump Jr. and Eric Trump, and the Trump Organization, sued the Internal Revenue Service and the Treasury Department for $10 billion, arguing that the agencies failed to take measures to protect his tax information.
And more breaking news tonight from a Miami federal court where President Donald Trump is suing the IRS for allegedly leaking his tax returns. The lawsuit puts Trump, his sons Eric and Don Jr. and the Trump Organization up against the Treasury Department, suing for $10 billion in damages. The lawsuit claims an IRS employee leaked the Trump's confidential tax returns to media outlets, including the New York Times and ProPublica. This allegedly happened between 2019 and 2020. NBC News is reaching out to the IRS for a response.
But the IRS lawsuit isn't even the most urgent issue in that exchange. Raskin then pivoted to the Epstein survivors. Thousands of Epstein documents were taken down after victims were identified.
Now to new fallout in the wake of the release of the Epstein files. The Justice Department striking a deal with attorneys for survivors who say their lives were turned upside down when the DOJ failed to redact some of their personal information from the files and then posted those files to the DOJ's website. Attorney Pam Bondi has acknowledged mistakes. The Attorney General saying the department has now taken down several thousand documents that may have included victims' information. Let's bring in MS Now Legal Affairs reporter Fallon Gallagher, Eric Fudali, who represents several Epstein survivors, and former federal prosecutor Barrett Berger. So, Fallon, what do we know about this deal that was apparently reached between the survivors' attorneys and the Justice Department?
Yeah, this hearing was supposed to be happening this hour, and then late last night, Judge Berman issued a single-page order canceling the hearing, saying that the survivors' attorneys and DOJ reached a deal to resolve those privacy issues in an expeditious and meaningful way to prevent future harm. There were very few details in that order, and we have not seen anything official from the Department of Justice, but we do know what the survivors were asking for. Their lawyers had submitted a letter earlier this week saying that they needed the Justice Department to resolve these issues and remove any identifying information. You'll remember that there were a plethora of material of names, photos, other identifying information that was not redacted properly. They have a list of 350 survivors' names, and they want that material corrected. So they have asked for it to be taken down and fixed, or they've asked for the entire website to come down. Now, we know that DOJ, in a separate letter, has said that they have removed several thousand files, pages, and that they're going through and correcting those redactions, and I would presume that they will be back up. But again, we don't know the specifics of this deal. We just know that the judge was appeased enough to cancel today's hearing.
And so, Eric, you know, it was the victims, the survivors, who worked so hard to get these files released. They wanted transparency, they want accountability, and they trusted that their personal information and privacy would be protected. And now the files are released, but they say their lives have been turned upside down again. What are your clients experiencing?
Well, that's absolutely what's going on. You know, I'm not sure if it's intentional or it's incompetence, but what is very clear is that the DOJ has disregarded the well-being of the survivors. One of my clients was named 538 times in the latest release of Epstein files.
Wow.
538 times. Of course, we immediately alerted the DOJ. As of yesterday, it was down to 2 times, but 1 time is too many times. It is unacceptable. They have had so much time to do this, and this is just simple redactions. It's just redacting names. This is not rocket science. And the whole reason they're claiming that they're basically late, they violated the law and they were almost a month and a half late to reveal these documents, is they needed to redact. Right. But what were they doing for this time? 538 times is just beyond comprehension and competence.
One person.
One person. And she was not the only one of my clients whose name was released unredacted in these files. It's incompetence and it's just unacceptable.
Barrett, the judge writes that he is, quote, pleased but not surprised that the DOJ and survivors' attorneys were able to resolve this on their own. But just how bizarre is it to have gotten to this point where a judge nearly needed to get involved in protecting sex abuse victims because of such an apparent failure of the Justice Department?
I mean, redacting victim information is not an issue that is unique to this Epstein investigation. This is something that federal prosecutors deal with in every case involving sensitive victims, involving child victims, or involving sex trafficking, period. This is something that DOJ attorneys know how to do. They do it in every case that involves these kind of victims. And the fact that this information was included is so tragic for the victims because you can't unring that bell. You can't get that information out of the digital sphere. I'm glad they reached the agreement, but DOJ was facing some real risks there, both for potential civil lawsuits down the road from people who had had their information compromised and potentially some sort of contempt of court. So DOJ was certainly in no position to fight this, and it's promising that they reached a settlement as quickly as they did with the victims' attorneys.
I mean, some survivors say they've been getting death threats after their private information was left unredacted, so you can't put that toothpaste back in a tube. The New York Times found dozens of uncensored images of naked women with their faces visible. The Associated Press found multiple incidents where names and faces were obscured in one document only to be left in another.
I really appreciate you for watching, and make sure to check out this one.